Hi, and welcome to Level Up Reading. I'm Mark Samples. And in this multi-session program, I'm going to teach you the exact system I use to read any passage fast. After going through this training, you will be able to read your college assignments twice as fast, and you will understand more and remember more. In this first session, I'll be talking about 3 reading myths that we've all learned and that we all need to overcome to gain speed and greater understanding. Then I'll teach you 3 reading mindsets. And finally, 5 reading tips that you can put into practice right now to get faster reading. And in fact, you will likely get to 2 times reading speed just after this first lesson, not counting the other lessons that will continue, just with the techniques and the mindsets and the tips that I teach you in the next 25 or so minutes. That means that if you continue on to the other sessions, you can get up to 4 times, 6 times, or even 10 times as fast. Yes, 10 times as fast. I know because it happened to me. And so let's get started. And as we do, I want to give you a couple tips for success as you approach this program. I want to invite you first to shut off all distractions, silence your phone, turn off your notifications for your computer, turn off anything that will ding or interrupt you in the next 25 minutes, and really just make a commitment to be present, to be actively engaged with the ideas and the techniques that I present to you. And in so doing, try to adopt what's called a growth mindset. This is a term or a phrase introduced by psychologist Carol Dweck, who is at Stanford University. And she's been studying mindsets for several decades now. And she says there are two mindsets, a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Fixed mindset people believe that their intellect is really fixed. You're born with however much you have, and that's about it. Whereas a growth mindset person sees every experience as a way to grow and develop and add to the skills, intelligence, and abilities that that person has. Think of it this way. A fixed mindset person believes that your smarts are akin to height, the quality of height. That is, you can study all you want, but you're not going to get any taller, right? You can wear platform shoes, but that's just a momentary adjustment. Whereas a growth mindset person believes that your smarts are more like strength. You can work out focused muscle groups, and you can do cardiovascular training, and you can indeed get stronger, and you can get greater health. And we want to adopt a growth mindset where everything that we do, even if it's challenging, will add a little bit to our knowledge and our skills and our abilities, especially in this case with the skill of reading. And then I want you to take just a moment and imagine. Visualize in your mind and imagine what it would feel like and what it would mean if there were just one gem in this training session for you. Maybe 95% of it is not useful to you right now, but maybe there's one gem hidden in here that if it clicks with you, it could change everything. How could it help you? How could it help you in school? How could it help you in life? If you read more broadly, if you understood more quickly the ideas of others and could have opinions on them, use them to better yourself, use them to better your work, then imagine in your career what an advantage it would be if you took the time to be able to read and understand fast anything that was put in front of you. Imagine how you could continue your education, advance your skills, and really get ahead in school, in your future career, and in your life. Okay, before we get started into the myths, mindsets, and tips, I want to tell you a little bit about my story because you might be wondering, okay, who I am and why I'm teaching you this stuff and what it means to you. And you might also be wondering, well, what if some people are just born fast readers and some people are not? Okay? And that's really kind of how I used to be. I always have been a slow reader. If you had asked me, I would say I'm a slow reader. I've always read painstakingly slow. I have to read things multiple times, and it takes me far longer than I would like to admit to read a passage. I've always had a low confidence level in my reading. That is, sometimes I got it and sometimes I didn't, and I wasn't sure which was which always. And I'm talking about in especially beginning in college, in the university setting as an undergraduate student. I had pretty inconsistent results. Sometimes I would do great and understand everything. Other times I really wouldn't get everything at the level that I thought I should. And I, believe it or not, I had this practice of reading all the way through my undergraduate studies, and then all the way through my graduate studies, through all of my research for my PhD, through earning my PhD in musicology at the University of Oregon. I got all the way through the end of graduate school, my terminal degree in my discipline, with this reading approach. And I'll tell you, it was not fun at times with that stack of reading. But something amazing happened in the summer after my PhD, that I got my PhD. I read this book called Breakthrough Rapid Reading by Peter Kump, and I would highly recommend that you go and read this book. It's a 6-week home study course, and many of the techniques and tips and approaches that I'm going to teach to you in this course have their genesis or their culmination in this book. And the way it worked for me was I had read extensively and have since read extensively on various approaches and techniques to reading. But this book was the first one where it all kind of came together and clicked for me. It's called Breakthrough Rapid Reading by Peter Kump, and it's a book written in the 70s, I believe, and based on the techniques of one of the preeminent rapid reading teachers of the 20th century, Evelyn Wood. So it kind of clicked, and all of a sudden, in the summer after my PhD, I no longer self-identified as a slow reader. I had changed. My reading was transformed. I was not just 2 times as fast, I was 10 times as fast consistently, and every time I knew that I was going to get everything out of that reading that I needed to get. And the reason I'm putting together this program is that I wish someone had told me then what I'm going to tell you in this session and in the coming sessions. And I promise you that this is something that can be learned, and you can go from being a slow reader to knowing that you are a fast reader. And I guarantee that your reading speed and comprehension will be 2 times as powerful. And it's likely, if you put some effort into this, you'll get results far greater than that. So let's get started. Okay, music history reading myth number 1. Myth. You should read left to right, top to bottom, straight through from the first page to the last. Isn't this what we all learned? Read left to right, top to bottom, straight through from the first page to the last. Well, the truth is, for most nonfiction passages, starting at the beginning of the reading, that is at word 1, starting at the beginning and reading straight through from the first word to the last word is really the least efficient reading method that you could have. In fact, you should only begin linear reading after you have a big picture idea of the passage. That is, you should only begin what we commonly think of as quote-unquote reading, that is, reading those words, all the words in sequence. You should only start that after you do something else, which is getting a big picture idea of the passage, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. So in this program, we're really going to consider this type of reading to be one of many kinds of readings and one of many approaches. Okay, music history reading myth number 2. Myth: there is only one way to read, and it is appropriate for every type of reading, from a newspaper to a novel to a scholarly article. Well, as I was just saying, there are in fact many different ways to quote-unquote read through a passage, such as surveying, previewing a passage, reading a passage, that is what we typically think of as reading, and also reviewing a passage. And here's the key: most reading passages that you will confront in college and afterwards, most reading passages benefit from the use of several of these strategies in combination: surveying, previewing, reading, and reviewing. And in fact, I'm going to really dig into each one of these strategies in later courses. And I'm going to teach you how to use each of these in combination in a single reading system that will give you great results every single time, of both speed and understanding. Okay, music history reading myth number 3. Myth: you should be able to comprehend and remember 100% of what you read after reading it once. Okay, listen to that again. You should be able to comprehend and remember 100% of what you read after reading it only once. Well, hopefully this sounds silly to you when put so bluntly. But isn't this what we expect of ourselves on a routine basis? We expect ourselves to just have to read something once, and we expect that if all the words kind of go through our minds in sequence, we've done this thing called reading, and we've fulfilled our obligation. And really, I want to make a drastic shift here from this quote-unquote reading to a new approach which really gets at understanding. And to talk about that, let's transition from myths to mindsets. And the first music history reading mindset number 1, is to aim for understanding, not quote-unquote reading. Okay, so let's say your professor gives you an assignment and says, read chapter 1 in your music history textbook. So you think, okay, the assignment is, I need to see and hear in my mind all of the words in that chapter, and then I have fulfilled my obligation. Well, I want to shift this here. Anytime your professor says, read, what he or she really means is, I want you to understand chapter 1 of your textbook. And if we really move the target here and aim for understanding, not just reading, a whole new world opens up to us. And here's the first benefit, the kind of secret benefit of aiming for understanding and not reading. And here's the secret. You ready? You don't necessarily have to read to understand. And in fact, you can get a whole lot out of other strategies that are not quote-unquote reading, such as pre-reading, which is a systematic surveying of the information of the text. Because the body of the text is not the only part of the text that gives important information. In fact, the table of contents, the title of the passage or the chapter, and the section headings give an incredible wealth of information that oftentimes we just skip over. And in a separate session of this program, we'll learn a specific system of how to survey the text and extract a whole bunch of information out of just the title, the section headings, and the first line of each paragraph, or the first sentence, the topic sentence of each paragraph. And you can gain a whole lot of understanding before you even start reading. So in this program, in all sessions, we're going to aim for understanding, whether or not we do any level of reading, quote unquote. Okay, music history mindset number 2. Read in focused blocks of time of at least 30 minutes. Okay, read in focused blocks of uninterrupted time of at least 30 minutes at a time, and even better, 45 minutes or an hour. Now, I'll be honest, if you just get this one mindset shift, this could completely change the game for you. Now, let me break this down a little bit. What does this mean? Okay, ask yourself if this situation sounds familiar. You sit down to read chapter 1 of your music history textbook, and it's the first day of the term, and so you're thinking, okay, I'm going to be really motivated. I'm really going to understand this. I'm really going to read this, which in your mind, you're still under the myth of read it once, 100% comprehension. So you really have to focus in on each word, okay? So you read the first paragraph and you think, I didn't really get that. I wonder what's going on Facebook. And so you check Facebook for a little bit, and 3 minutes, 5 minutes later, you come back and you read the first paragraph again. And you think, well, I didn't really get that, but I got it a little bit better. And then you get a text message. And so you look at your phone and you have a quick text message with your friend, and then you get back and you have to say, okay, what was this first paragraph about again? Okay, I think I have a bit of an idea, and so let's go to the second. You get to the second sentence of the second paragraph, and you think, I really have to go to the bathroom. And so you, or actually, you kind of just slightly, maybe, kind of have to maybe go to the bathroom, and so you think, yeah, I should probably go, and so you leave the text. And on it goes, and before you know it, you've wasted, or at least 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour has maybe gone by, and you're still on the first page of your music history reading, and you're thinking, oh, I'm such a slow reader. But really, the problem is not that you're a slow reader. It's that you have too many interruptions in the flow of your thought. And more scientific studies are giving ironclad evidence that we really do not do well when we have lots of interruptions in our focused thought. And in fact, when we have an interruption, it can take up to 15 minutes to get back in the mindset of what we were doing before the interruption happened. So if you get interrupted every 15 minutes for 2 hours, you really have not gotten a whole lot done. And imagine if you're getting interrupted every 3 minutes or 5 minutes. So your mindset should be to set aside 30 minutes of focused time where you shut off all notifications, shut off all potential interruptions, and really just commit yourself to having a continuous amount of time to approach a set of reading. Okay, music history mindset number 3. Go through 3 phases every time you read. First, pre-reading. Second phase, reading. Third phase, reviewing. Okay, every time you read, you should be going through 3 phases, and these are 3 phases of this complete system that I'm going to be teaching you in much more detail later. But at this point, I just want you to catch this approach. Imagine in that 30-minute block of time, you divided the time up into 3 sections: pre-reading, reading, and reviewing. So let's say in 30 minutes you take 7 minutes to do pre-reading. You look at the title and really consider what it might mean. Then you look at all the section headings and try to get a sense of the structure, overall flow of the reading. And that takes you about 7 minutes. And then you spend 20 minutes actually reading the chapter. If a chapter is a short chapter, let's say 10 to 15 pages, you can get through 10 to 15 pages, whether or not you catch everything, and you can get through that in about 20 minutes, and then spend the last 3 minutes going back over and seeing the whole picture again, the whole chapter and how everything fits together. And anytime you have a block of time set aside for reading, you should go through these 3 phases. If it's 30 minutes, or even if it's 15 minutes, you should take the first few minutes for pre-reading, the large chunk of reading, and then save 1 or 2 minutes at the end to review your passage. Okay, hopefully you're seeing how these mindsets are kind of working together. How you can give you really want to go for understanding, you want to give focused blocks of time, and you want to go through 3 phases every time you read. And if you combine these 3 mindsets, you will really start getting great speed, and you'll start realizing that your understanding really does level up here. Okay, let's move on to some music history reading tips. Here's tip number 1. To get up to 10 times faster reading, go into the cone of silence for 30 minutes to an hour and just read. Okay, 10 times faster reading. Now you're thinking, really? Yeah, really. You might be amazed at how much faster you can understand what you're reading if you just set aside focused blocks of time. And you're thinking, didn't you just say this in a mindset? Yes, I did, and it bears repeating. If you've ever seen the movie Get Smart, or the old TV show Get Smart, they had this technology, these spies had this technology. One was called the cone of silence, and it was this way to put a cone of silence around you that you couldn't hear anything outside, and no one could hear what you were saying. And it was this pretty funny, it led to some pretty funny situations for Steve Carell in the movie version. But here's this idea of completely cutting off from all potential interruptions, shutting down Facebook, shutting down your phone, shutting down Tumblr, shutting down Snapchat, shutting down your text messages, just for 30 minutes. And here's the promise. I heard someone say once that when you're approaching using your time, and this was someone who did business productivity, and he said, when you're using your time, you should either be working like a dog, 100%, or you should be lying on a beach somewhere. Don't mix the two. Okay? You should be either working like a dog, or you should be lying on a beach somewhere. In other words, don't mix the two. Don't bring your work to the beach, or else you won't get either work done or relaxation. And alternately, when you're working, just work. When you're reading, just read. When you're doing homework, just do homework. And the promise is, if you will take a concentrated amount of time, 30 minutes, to get all of your reading done, you can get all the reading done that would have taken you an hour or maybe 2 hours, and then you can use that hour and a half that you have left over to hang out with your friends, or relax, or take a nap, or get some sleep. Okay, let's move on. Music history reading tip number 2, write down your goal for understanding so you can know when to stop reading. And you really should write down your goal for understanding before you do a passage of reading. Now, by goal for understanding, I mean this. When you read a passage, you might have different levels of need of understanding out of that particular passage. So for instance, if you're reading an article for potential use in a research paper, you might just want to know, what is it about? That's the kind of basic level of reading understanding. One level above that, level 2, would be what's the central claim? What is the author, when it's all said and done, what point is the author trying to get across from this particular passage? A third level incorporates the first 2, what is it about and what's the claim, but also adds on top of that 3 or 4 central examples that you can recall and restate in your own words as evidence for the first 2 levels of what's it about and what's the claim. So the third level adds 3 or 4 central examples and evidence. The fourth level is really, you need to know almost all the major details, examples, and in the case of music history, composers and key works and their stylistic traits. This is a very high level of detailed reading that you don't always need to employ. And then the fifth level, the highest level, is the I need to know 100% of this information because it's a life and death situation. And this is like, imagine a nursing student reading about patient care. And if they get 1,000 cc's instead of 100 cc's of a medication, it could make the difference between life and death. And really, this level of reading is very seldom needed in a music history course. You can more often go for level 3, let's say, where you get the central, what is it about, what's the central claim, and 3 or 4 of the most central points. And then this prepares you for the lecture so that you can get a lot more out of the lecture when you arrive there. So write down your goal for understanding, level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, so that you can know when to stop reading. Okay, music history reading tip number 3, set a time limit for reaching your understanding goal and use a timer. It really is true, the old saying that work expands to fit the time allowed. So if you give yourself 2 hours to read one chapter in your music history textbook, you'll spend 2 hours reading it, thinking that there must be something more you can get out of it. But if you say, I will reach my goal for understanding in 30 minutes, and then you go through those 3 phases of pre-reading, reading, and reviewing, you will reach your goal for understanding. Set a timer. Use the timer on your phone or on your watch. Set a timer for 30 minutes, and then allot the first 7 minutes for pre-reading. Get as much out of it as you can. 20 minutes for actually reading, and then finally 3 minutes for reviewing, and that's your 30 minutes. And then if you've given your full attention to it, you can just be done, move on, and go hang out with your friends with no guilt. Okay, music history reading tip number 4. Use your finger to pace your reading to keep your eyes from jumping back. Okay, that sounds kind of weird. Use your finger. What's the deal here? Okay, well, when we were in first grade, maybe we were taught to use our finger to underline the words as we read them, but then, we got to second and third and fourth grade, and we were too cool to do that anymore, and really, we stopped doing it. But when we stopped doing it, we unwittingly took away one of the greatest reading accelerators that we have available to us. And this is an idea directly from Peter Kump's Breakthrough Rapid Reading, and it is so valuable. Here's what you do. Take your pointer finger and underline, move your pointer finger under the words as you read them. And the goal here is to train your eye to track with your finger and always move forward. This keeps our eyes from always kind of regressing and jumping back up a sentence or back up a paragraph because we think that we've missed something. And I don't know if that ever happens to you. You read a sentence and then you read it again, and then you go back up to the top of the paragraph and read the whole paragraph again, and before you know it, you've read the same paragraph 10 or 20 times. And oftentimes we do this without even knowing it. But sometimes we do it because we think maybe we've missed something. But the truth is, if we would just keep going forward, oftentimes, if we missed something, it was completely inessential. And if we did miss something that's essential, we could read the whole passage twice in the same amount of time that it would take us to just read it once with a bunch of regressions. So here's the tip. Use your finger to pace your reading to keep your eyes from jumping back. And I'll tell you a little story here. I've used this exercise in live reading workshops, and I'm going to teach this to you live in a later session. And when I have students we time their reading and we get a basic words per minute, and then we introduce this finger pacing system, and immediately their words per minute jumps to double, triple, and even quadruple as fast just from adding this one tip. Okay, here we go. Music history reading tip number 5. Shut the book when you're taking notes. Shut the book when you're taking notes. Okay, what's the deal here? We're trying to separate the process of reading and the process of recall. So perhaps this sounds familiar. You're reading your music history textbook and you're trying to get all the good notes, and so you read a sentence and you transcribe it into your notes. You, word by word, you transcribe it from the text to your notes. Well, transcribing is a different process from recalling. So what I want you to do instead is to read through a section of a passage, then close the book, and then write down all of your notes. Write down as many as you can remember. And then, if you've forgotten anything, you can open the book back up, read the whole passage again. Now, this doesn't have to be the entire chapter, but maybe one section of the chapter under a single section heading, and then take your notes and add to them. And what you're doing here is incrementalizing the recall process. You're turning the process of recalling the information, remembering the information, into something that happens in little bits and pieces throughout the process of reading and then recalling. So, shut the book when you're taking notes in order to separate the processes of reading and recall. Okay, let's do a couple exercises here to finish up. Exercise number 1. I want you to think, which mindset, if you adopted it today, right now, would make the most dramatic difference in your reading? And I want you to write this down and commit to starting right now to putting this mindset in place. So is it that you need to start aiming for understanding and not reading? Do you need to try out a focused block of uninterrupted time of at least 30 minutes? Or maybe you work up to 30 minutes by doing 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes, and then 15 minutes, and then 30 minutes. Or do you need to start going through the 3 phases every time you read, starting with pre-reading, then doing your reading, and then reviewing for a couple minutes? Which mindset, if you adopted it now, would make the most dramatic difference? And I want you to write it down now and commit to starting. Okay, great. Exercise number 2. Which tip, if you adopted it today, would make the most dramatic difference in your reading? Again, write it down and commit to starting now. Okay, which of these tips is the most appealing to you and could be that one gem that changes everything for you? Is it going into the cone of silence, doing that uninterrupted block of time? Is it simply writing down your goal for understanding before you start reading so that you can know when to stop reading? Is it tip number 3, which was setting a time limit for your reading and using a timer? Is it tip number 4, which is to use your finger to pace your reading and to cut back on eye regressions? Or is it tip number 5, where you shut the book and really separate the process of reading and recall? Okay? Choose one of these tips, look back over the tips, think back over them, and write down the one that would make the most dramatic difference in your reading, and start it right now. Okay, good. That's the end of session 1 of Level Up Reading. Reading myths, mindsets, and tips. And in the next session, we'll begin digging into these strategies a little bit more and start installing this complete reading system. I'll see you in the next session.